Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is my review for the final season of The Americans. And what this final season is essentially about is after the events of season 5, we actually take a 3-year time jump, and basically Philip is no longer in the KGB. He is now a travel agent. He has actually been able to get out of that business, while Elizabeth is still very fully ingrained in that community, along with Paige, who is on her way to becoming a full-fledged spy for the KGB. Meanwhile, you have Stan, who is no longer working in counterintelligence. However, as the season goes on, and more of, more stuff starts to happen surrounding his agency, he starts to grow more and more suspicious, about the Jennings, and this could very well be the end for them, and that's really all I'm going to say. So let's just get out of the way. I was obviously hyped for the season. If you guys know me, The Americans is one of my favorite shows on TV, but with a much more bittersweet type of anticipation, because while I was very excited that this season was going to be shorter and that we are getting into, the heat of things, I knew very well this was going to be the last season, and I, for one, definitely was not ready to say goodbye to this show. I'm happy to see that it ended, when it did. A lot of shows just kind of go on and on and on, and I was glad to see this show, it did have an end in sight, and I was definitely happy about that. But again, similar to The Leftovers last year, it was definitely a little bit harder for me to, especially, it took me a while to actually finish this season, just because I just I wanted to take my time. I didn't want to believe that it was, fully over, and I wanted to really savor that moment, and in the end, did this deliver? Holy shit, yes it did. The American Season 6 is pretty perfect. There really isn't anything in this season that I really could have asked for more of. It is easily one of the most dramatic, one of the most emotional, and easily, I think, the most urgent season we have ever gotten of this show, and I'm just getting into right now, starting off with the cast. Now, this is going to be a no-brainer. I mean, you guys know all these guys are really talented, but I really do want to highlight everyone. First of all, Keri Russell in this season as Elizabeth. I mean, holy shit, she continues to impress me every single season, but this might just be her strongest season yet, because what she has to do in this season is make you both care, but also completely despise her. Elizabeth is at her lowest point yet. She is smoking constantly. She frequently quarrels with Philip, and these aren't like simple fights. These are much more, these are much more important things, and it's, very long lasting in that sense. You can also see how this is really damaging her. However, every single second, she still remains very dedicated to her country, and she still has that goal that she wants to, turn things around for her country, and she wants to, she wants to make things right. She wants to overthrow the U.S. She wants to win this Cold War that's been going on for so many years, and she does an incredible job this season. I think we are given a much deeper look into Elizabeth than any other season we have had. Obviously, we've known what she's gone through, but even more so this season, we get an even bigger look into her, and she absolutely killed it here. If she's not nominated for an Emmy, I will be very surprised, and I will honestly be outraged, because she is simply one of the best actresses working in any TV show today, and just where she's taking this character, the lengths she's gone, the places she goes, I think it's just incredible, and I think definitely will not be forgotten anytime soon. And then Matthew Rhys, once again as Philip, is fantastic here, but he's playing a bit of a different role this season, because like I said, while he is still very much a active part in Elizabeth's life, internally, not really. These two are very much apart for a lot of the season. He doesn't really believe in a lot of what she's fighting anymore, and he feels very differently when it comes to some of her goals and things like that, and I really loved getting into that, and he does an incredible job this season. You can see that he still does care for her, but it really is starting to concern him that this is starting to get to her, and that it is starting to have a very visceral impact on her, and I think he does an incredible job here. here. He's constantly getting roped into things, and you just feel so bad for this guy. I mean, I've heard people call Philip the saddest man on TV right now, and this season, more than ever, I think very much underlines that. Once again, Matthew Rhys, just fantastic. These two are probably the best duo working on TV right now, and once again, if he's not nominated, I will be completely outraged because he has just been fantastic as this character, and once again, just shows how great he really is here. And then the rest of the cast here, once again, is obviously fantastic. You know, Costa Ronin as Oleg. I was very surprised that he did live at the end of last season, but where they go with him, I actually really did love. Holly Taylor this season is just phenomenal. Every single season, she's impressed me more and more as Paige Jennings, and I've said it every season, and I'll say it again. Most TV shows of this kind, child actors would be the weaker point. Holly Taylor has been one of the stronger points for this show. I think she's a fantastic actress. She's easily the most underrated character in the show, and Paige, more than ever, goes through her biggest shift yet as a character, because she's now gotten herself involved in something that you're not 100% sure if she really wants to get involved in, that she 100% really understands what she's doing, and I really love seeing that. I think she does an incredible job, especially in the back half of the season. She has some incredible scenes. Noah Emmerich as Stan, once again, is great. I mean, you see throughout the season, his suspicion just starts to increase more and more, and even though he doesn't want to believe what's going on, when things are getting, you know, much more, you know, like I said, when things at the FBI, you know, people are turning up dead and things are just going south for them, he really starts to put things together, and you really are getting worried for him. But at the same time, you do want him to catch them. You do want him to go after them because that is his job, but you're also very much on Philip and Elizabeth's side because you know the friendship that especially Philip has with Stan, and you know what could happen, you know, if he finds out, how ruined that could become for him, and I think they did a great job with that. And finally, Margo Martindale. Margo Martindale has always been fantastic, but this season she does have a much bigger role, mainly because she is the handler now, and she's also a main character, and she, once again, is just fantastic as Claudia. You can see how determined and just how dedicated Claudia is. She knows what she wants. She won't let anyone change her beliefs, and I very much did love that. And especially in scenes with her and Elizabeth, I mean, this woman's scary. She really is. She's always been, but even this is probably the season where I feared Claudia the most. Like, if I was in a room with Claudia, oh my god, I would be so terrified, and there's a reason why she is the only person to win. I think it's ridiculous that she's the only person that's won an Emmy, but this season definitely shows you that. Point is, everyone's great here. Everyone does a fantastic job. I could honestly go on and on about the acting, but I definitely want to get more into things because there's just so much to get into when it comes to this season. So now let's get to the directing and the writing, because going into any final season, that is the thing to fear the most, is how is this going to change the show? You want a show to evolve, but you also don't want it to lose its identity, and The Americans has done an incredible job with not doing that, because I know a lot of people were let down by how last season was, the slower pace, and that there wasn't a lot going on. Well, that was just preparing you for this season, because let's just say you get your payoff here. You definitely do get your payoff this season. The tone feels a lot more urgent. The things that happen feel a lot more dire, and things do not go well for them really this season. They do an incredible job with doing that, but again, the show's not losing its focus. Sure, we got more spying going on last season than last season, which I believe had the, I think last season had the least amount of spying we've had any season prior, and I think we definitely did see that there. But, like I said, the show doesn't lose its identity. It still is focused primarily on the family and how they deal with this situation and what this really means for them, and I thought the tone was very well realized. I really loved it, and again, just everything feels so much more vital, and I think the directing was just spot on. But the writing, once again, I love in the show. I've said it so many times, but every time I think I know where the show is going to go, it just doesn't go there. If you've stuck with me for all my reviews, you've known that's one thing that I've always gotten severely wrong. I have never been able to predict what is going to happen on a season of The Americans, and this season more than ever. I never thought they were going to go into a time jump. I did not think Philip was going to leave the KGB, and I certainly didn't think that the way this season ends, which we'll get into in spoilers for sure, is the way that the series does wrap up. I definitely was not expecting that, but what I love most about this season is, again, just how urgent everything really does feel. It's a very different kind of season because Philip and Elizabeth, like I said, they're at odds for most of it. And as the season goes on, they become more and more apart. Not just literally, but also mentally. They really are not on the same wavelength anymore at all. Philip is much more rational, and he really is trying to help out Elizabeth, but Elizabeth, she's just too far gone. She's too focused on her country and focusing on all these things, and things like calling Henry or caring about Paige on this deeper level, she just doesn't seem to care about as much, and you really are watching her destroy herself, and it is just devastating to watch. But at the same time, they do an incredible job with dehumanizing her. I mean, she does some incredibly fucked up stuff in this season, and it's not like the other seasons she hasn't, but this season really reminds you, no, these are not good people, and the only the whole point of the show isn't to sympathize with them necessarily and to get behind what they're doing. It's to understand what they're doing and to see what they're really fighting for and to see how much this is affecting them, because at the end of the day, these are ultimately two people who have been thrown into this situation, and they're just so far into it that they don't really see a way out at this point. Philip is one of the rare exceptions. Elizabeth, on the other hand, still doesn't see a way out. Even at that, though, Philip, you can still see he does get roped into it a lot, much more than you expect him to, especially when you go to the beginning of the season. You think, okay, he's out of this, everything's great, and that's not really the case. And I really love where they took that this season. I thought it was very surprising, and I really love that. Once again, the show really does benefit from being the final season. The stakes, they really did up the stakes this season, and because of that, a lot of the confrontations that Elizabeth has, just like with some of the people she meets up with, they're a lot more investing, and you feel a lot more attached to these people because you don't know what's going to happen. Is this going to be the person that exposes them? Is this going to be someone that could lead them toward a dark path? Is this going to be the person that could just ruin everything? You really don't know, and they do an incredible job with that. And again, this isn't something that wasn't there in other seasons, but it's just a lot more prevalent here because of what can happen. Since this is the final season, the possibilities are endless, and I think they did an incredible job with doing that. And then again, when you go to a character like Paige, who, like I said, isn't really innocent anymore, you can still see that she does want that regular life. She is still trying to live as a regular American teenager, but at the same time, she's gotten herself so far into this that you don't know if she's going to turn out like Philip or Elizabeth, and I really love where they went there. I know a lot of people aren't fans of Paige, but I've always loved her character because I think she's one of the few teenagers that doesn't just go through normal teenage problems. This is someone who you can very much side with, and a lot of the times Paige kind of feels like us. She's like the audience that's like, no, what are you doing? She's trying to rationalize everything that happened to her and what her parents do, but at the same time, she knows what they're doing is completely wrong, and she doesn't really want any part of it, but she just can't help but find herself in these situations, and I really love getting into that. And again, this season focuses a lot more on that marriage between Philip and Elizabeth and how it was an arranged marriage, and we've never fully known if these two really do love each other. Even with them getting married last season, it's been very slow with them being able to maintain a legit relationship, and this season more than ever kind of starts to show that maybe these two weren't meant for each other. Maybe this just simply was in an arranged marriage, and in another situation, maybe they wouldn't have ended up together, and things might have gone way differently for them. Where we harken back to characters like, Gregory, I think the person that Elizabeth really wishes that she did end up with and she didn't, or someone like Martha, who surprisingly isn't in this season. I was very surprised, but it makes sense because of the fact that Martha, like I said, she's had her time on the show. She's done everything. I think we've gotten as much mileage as we can out of that character, and she's really the only character that has a legit happy ending. So, no, we do not see Martha this season. I'll just tell you guys that right now. But then you have someone like Stan, who he's still living this great life, and he still doesn't know Philip and Elizabeth's true identity, and he's been able to live, it's the same, pretty much because that he's living vicariously, and I think he's, again, one of the most interesting parts of this season is, again, you don't know when is he going to put it together, because it's going to happen at some point. I mean, that's inevitable. He's going to figure it out, and it's just a matter of when, and I think they did a really great job of crafting those building blocks, not just throughout the season, but throughout the entire show, and it's very worthwhile once we do get to that point. The cinematography, once again, just the way the show is helmed, everything about the camera work is great. Just little quiet scenes here and there, like Elizabeth looking around, and before she kills someone, you see her look around, and she's kind of questioning whether or not, and it really puts you into that character's head, because you're realizing, sure, Elizabeth does do a lot of things that aren't human, but she does still have emotion. She is still capable of doing that, and it's shocking, but they do a really great job with the cinematography. There's a lot of great scenes this season. There's rarely an episode that goes by where Elizabeth doesn't kill someone, and the way they craft that, they craft it as if she's almost an animal, because, again, they're really trying to dehumanize her, so we hate her when she's at her lowest point yet, and she then builds herself back up again. That's when we really start to sympathize with her, and I think they just do a brilliant job. One of the best stories, I think, for Elizabeth this season, actually, is her and this character of Glenn, because Glenn is someone that, in other seasons, Elizabeth would have just killed this guy, no question about it, but you can see as the season goes on, this is someone who basically, he has this dying wife, and she seems to actually start connect with this wife, and you're wondering if she's actually going to go through with it, if she actually will, steal the information from them. Will she start to care for them? I mean, even though, like I said, Elizabeth is at her lowest point yet, she also is at her most vulnerable, in the sense where you can see as the season starts to go on, she actually does start to care more for, people on a much more human level than I think she ever has, and this is a very good example of that here. With it overall, just everything about, the show's cinematography, just the way it's crafted is great. Just as every season, you do get that 80s feel, and that's definitely something that I am very much going to miss, once the show is done. Also, the musical cues on this show have always been one of the best things about the show. Just the montages they do, they're truly unlike any other show out there. I mean, sure, there's been other shows that have done it, but I don't think any show has done to greater effect than the Americans in terms of, montages and things like that, and they continue to absolutely kill it in that department here. Particularly one montage at the end of the finale that honestly had me near tears. It was so effective, it was so dire, and just such a morose note to end on, and I really couldn't have asked for anything better. That is definitely something that I will absolutely miss in the show, amongst many other things, but that is definitely one of the things that I think the show just masters perfectly, that I don't really think any other show will really be able to replicate in the same way that the Americans did. Also, something else I really loved about this season is it's very similar to The Leftovers Season 3, in that, similar to that time jump, when we come back, everyone really is in their best place yet, as in Elizabeth and Paige's relationship is much closer and healthier than ever. Even though Paige is in some really dangerous activity, she is very much involved with Elizabeth and Claudia, and they've kind of created their own sort of dynamic. Claudia is more of a, grandmother type figure to Paige. I mean, you would think that they're related. That's really how close they've become. Philip is much more closer with Henry, and they have a much more healthier relationship because he's home more often, and he's able to care for Henry because he's not as involved with the KGB anymore. Like I said, Elizabeth does rope him into it quite a few times, but he does in fact try to get closer with Henry, and he has succeeded. That Stan is happily married to Renee, and he's not as involved with, he's left the counterintelligence down because it was just too much for him, and it's made him a happier man. Oleg has settled down with, a wife and son. It's these little things that are introduced in the first episode that make the end point of the season that much more heartbreaking when pretty much all of this crumbles, and I think just shows the genius of the show. Sure, since the final season, everything is pretty much in high gear. The tension, the suspense, that's all amped up to a whole other level this season, but there are going to be moments of, calmness and calmness and a brief sense of hope, and I think they did a very good job with, exhibiting that this season. It only, like I said, makes the saddest and most bleakest points of this season that much more effective. But now, guys, I really want to dive into spoilers because there's a lot that goes down in this final season, and I just really want to get into it. Now, obviously, there's a lot of stuff I can talk about here. Like, I can obviously talk about the very shocking moments between Philip and Kimmy, and that whole episode, because episode 5, I think, is one of the best episodes of this entire show. It shows every single sort of emotion that Philip has. It shows every single side of him. It examines his relationship with Paige, his relationship with Kimmy, his relation with Elizabeth. All of that is very well crafted in that 5th episode. But again, he ends up, ending it with Kimmy. And again, that does show, I think, the more moral side of Philip and how he's always kind of been the moral compass of this show. Either him or Paige, for sure. But I think Philip, he's always been the one that we sympathize with and the one that we always feel worse for because, again, we know that he doesn't really enjoy what he's doing. And Elizabeth's always been more dedicated in that sense where she does really represent, support the cause and wants to, she really does want to venture further into this life. Obviously, I can talk about, a lot of the things that Elizabeth got herself into, but again, in the end, what really matters is the finale, how everything wrapped up, and I just want to really get into that right now because, no, this was not at all the finale I was expecting. But that being said, once again, that's never really been a complaint with this show because I've never been able to predict anything, and I think it makes sense for the show to end on the most unexpected note possible. What would be the most unexpected note? Well, that would be that everyone gets out pretty much alive and they're able to kind of get out of this, and they do, but also they don't. And first of all, we have to talk about in the penultimate episode with Elizabeth and Claudia, that whole scene between those two, not only was it so tense, but I was shocked that Claudia got out of that alive. I thought for sure that Elizabeth was just going to gun her down right then and there, but she doesn't, and you can see there's that moment where, Elizabeth, she, as much as she was supporting the cause, you could tell that some of the things that Claudia was telling her, she just didn't want to do. She didn't want to kill someone in the KGB because of her prior experiences. And, when we flash back and we realize that she let someone in the KGB die and she really did kind of betray her country in that way, she didn't want to do that again. She wanted to let Nestorenko live because she didn't think that he was a traitor. And I really loved all of that. It was very surprising to see Elizabeth not side with Claudia for once and for her to have different beliefs than her because that just hasn't really happened. It's always been like what your handler says, that's what you do. And she's never really wavered in that sense, but here she really did. And it really did make sense why this is the thing that really does kind of break her. And then, of course, in the end of things, Philip, we think he's out of it, and he's not. We see that he is still very much, he is actually caught at the end of the 9th episode, and where we go in the 10th episode, I mean, that is exactly where I think we expected them to be, is that they're caught, and then they're on the run, and they have to grab Paige, and all of that, like I said, was very much expected. What wasn't expected is the way everything goes down, especially that confrontation would Stan, because this was a long time coming. Hell, I was the person who thought that Stan would figure out at the end of season 5, and he didn't. I expected him to find out maybe halfway through the season. I never expected it to take him all the way to the last episode, but honestly, it makes the most sense. Again, him and Philip were best friends, and they had that connection. You know, Philip even says to him, I was your only friend. So you can understand why Stan didn't want to believe it. But at the same time, he had a limited amount of options that he really couldn't see any other outcome than, oh, it's absolutely the Jennings. And you see at that moment, he's ready to take them in. He's ready to kill them. And he had everything you could possibly do to do that. I mean, he locked up Oleg because Oleg wasn't saying anything. Oleg wanted Philip to kind of, knew that Elizabeth was in danger and wanted Philip to kind of help her out. But at the same time, you could see that Oleg was very loyal to them. He didn't say anything, and because of that, he's actually now the one that's locked up, so he had that done. The Reverend, the Reverend that they interacted with for these 3 years, he said that there were 2 people, and he said their real Russian names, so he really did have every piece together, but just in the end, the Jennings win, and he really can't do anything about it. And I think Stan, out of everyone, really has the most brutal ending of all, because not only does he not get to turn in these Russian illegals, which has been his main goal since the beginning of the series. That's been the main thing that he's wanted to do, is to track down these Russian illegals and hopefully, save the Bureau, because that's been something that he's very much cared about. But now, Philip, before he leaves him in that moment, he tells him, watch out for Renee. She could very well also be a spy. And this is something that we didn't really explore this season, but I think it makes sense because, again, Stan never had any other sort of worries about that. Philip never really said anything about that to him. So obviously, he never really had any accusations. It wasn't going to be a huge part of the season. But now that he knows that, his marriage is kind of ruined. He's always going to be suspicious of her. He's always going to be questioning her. And I don't see how that marriage can survive. And it's devastating that things did not work out for Stan. But, I mean, at least he does have Henry. He does have Henry in the end, and we'll get to the way things do go there, but I think, like I said, Stan, out of everyone, probably does have the most tragic ending here. But then, of course, we get to everything that went down with Philip and Elizabeth. Of course, they were going to go to Russia. They were going to try to overthrow Gorbachev because they thought their country was at risk, and what I love the most about this, other than Elizabeth's dedication and Paige's sort of, her kind of being a wild card in the situation, is Phil. Because once again, that Philip isn't really representing this cause anymore, and that he isn't really even on their side anymore. I mean, he's gotten himself out of this, but at the same time, he was caught. All he can really do is just follow her and to do exactly, what Elizabeth is doing, because they're in this together and they're going to end this together. And you can see that he really wants to stay in America. There's even a moment where he asks her, maybe I will stay in America for 2 years. And that's what he wants to do, but it's just not possible. It's not the realistic outcome. At some point, he would have gotten captured. He would have gotten kidnapped. Stan knows, not kidnapped, but he would have gotten taken in by the FBI. Stan knows everything now. He could have easily used that against him, but he just doesn't. And he does go with Elizabeth to Russia. Who doesn't, though, is Paige. And here's the thing. A lot of people, I think, are going to question, why'd she go with them in the first place? I mean, we could see throughout the show that Paige was not as interested in this, that she just wanted a normal American life. She didn't want things to turn out the way they did. And, she didn't want to end up like her parents. So why'd she go with them in the first place? Well, let's look at the last confrontation she had with Elizabeth, where she told her that she's a liar and that she was a whore and that she wanted nothing to do with her. And Paige, knowing that they were going to Russia, I think she didn't want this to be the final image she had of her mother. She knew very well what could happen to Elizabeth. And I think despite the fact that she kind of resented a lot of their ideals and she definitely didn't support them at all in that sense, I think in the end, she just wanted to end things on a good note. Now, we don't know exactly when Paige got off the train and when she decided to make that decision to stay in America with Henry, which, once again, very surprised Henry never found out, but it does make sense. Henry was the one who had the most promising future. He was at that school. He was a hockey player. He was going off. He was trying to get into college. I mean, he had everything planned for himself, and there was no reason for them to take that away from him. And I think it shows in the end, how selfless Philip really was. Even though he, in his mind, wants them to be together and he wants to be with Henry, he just knows that he can't. And Paige, I think she just realized that she didn't want to do it. She knew very well what she was getting herself into, and she knew what could very much happen to her. I mean, she's going in this country where nobody knows her. She doesn't really know Russian that well. She's not even 100% involved with what's going on. Claudia's not a part of it anymore. She's fled as well. So what good does this really do her? It just doesn't. And again, you could look at it as, oh, Paige just decided at the last minute, but I really saw it as, like I said, she just wanted that one last positive moment with them. She didn't want this to be a she didn't want the last conversation with her mother to be a negative one, even though in the end it was negative. We don't know what happened in those moments in between on the train. What did she say to them as she left? We really don't know. And again, that's what I love about the show, is just the uncertainty of it all. We don't know what's going to happen to Paige. We don't know what happens to Philip and Elizabeth. We know that they're now trapped in Russia with a bunch of allies that are just going to completely alienate them because they've been away for years. I mean, Philip can't even remember the name of the colonel that enlisted him in all this, so he doesn't even know that. So right off the bat that they don't really fit in here anymore. All they really have at this point is each other, and they know they were going to end up. It was inevitable, and I love that one scene at the end where Elizabeth is imagining her and Gregory together, the life that she really wanted, because Gregory, I think, really was the man that she wanted to be with. He wasn't involved with any of this, and they really had this great connection. For Philip, I think that's Martha. I think, deep down, Martha was the person he cared about most. Martha was the person he wanted to be with. I do think he cares about Elizabeth, but Martha, I think he had the biggest connection with, and I think we definitely did see that in this, even though they know they're in this for the long haul, they know they're going to be together, and especially knowing what happens to Russia, how much they're kind of like overthrown, and how much they actually lose, because they lose in a devastating way. I mean, they lose pretty much everything in 2 years, and again, it's just the uncertainty of not knowing what's going to happen, but also knowing so much. Stan is never going to be able to really have a normal marriage, and even though he might have Henry, which, I think he has the most solid connection with at this point, at the same time, it's never going to be 100% positive, because he's going to have to tell him what his parents couldn't. And also, I love that final phone call scene with Henry. I love that scene as well, but it's just the uncertainty of it all, that all these characters, especially Philip and Elizabeth, who were veering in such different directions all season, have to be together. I think that's the most devastating part of all of this, because these two clearly aren't compatible anymore, and yet they are at the same time, and I think it's just a very fitting end to the show. I think the whole show overall was just kind of about sacrifices, and even though, yes, there was action, and yes, nobody got killed, every character lost something. I mean, Oleg doesn't, like I said, Oleg doesn't have a family. He's now in prison, and his family, they don't know what's happened to him. They're gonna have to live, his wife and his young son, who's just a baby, they're gonna have to live without him. Same with Paige, same with Henry. They're gonna have to live without their parents. Do they survive? Who knows? Stan, he's gonna have to live without his best friend by his side, and he's gonna know forever that his best friend, he's never gonna know if it was genuine or not. He's never gonna know if he actually did have a trusted ally in him. He's also doesn't know the full of it, because Elizabeth did lie and say that they didn't kill. Now, you could also say she did this for Paige, because she knows how against that idea, Paige is against that, the idea of killing and things like that, and we know very well that Elizabeth was very much a cold-blooded killer. Hell, she killed someone, I think, every single episode this season, minus this one. But yeah, really, I think in the end, everyone really did lose something, and they had to make a sacrifice, whether it was for their country, their family, or simply just for their own future. They had to sacrifice something that was so much bigger than themselves, and I think that really, at the end of the day, is the biggest theme of the show, and why I think it is probably one of the best shows of this entire decade, for sure. So overall, guys, The American Season 6 is everything that I really want it to be. I know there's things that I very much did leave out, but like I said, there's a lot that happens in this season. I can't just, I'm not just going to ramble on for like 2 hours about every single thing that happened. I talked about what I think was the most vital, especially in that finale. It didn't go the way I expected to. No. Was this the final season that I necessarily, could have hoped for? Absolutely. I think they gave us everything that they possibly could. I think we got the most out of these characters, and most of all, I'm just really happy that the show ended on a very satisfying note. There are so many final seasons that come out, and they've gone so far past their endpoint. Vampire Diaries or, Teen Wolf or something like that. And then there are shows like this and The Leftovers, and I think these shows should be an example of how long you should take a show and how you should end it, when you want to end it. You shouldn't let someone tell you to keep it going. I think, that's really the way to do it. And shows like The Americans or Leftovers, or even Justified, another fantastic show on FX that ended several years ago, have really been able to get the most out of their characters and really never felt that stale. The only season The Americans that really wasn't perfect in my mind is like season 3. Other than that, this has been a pretty perfect show overall, and this season absolutely is one of the best they've done. It is easily the most urgent season, it is the most emotional season, and it really gives you everything you want out of these characters you've been following for many years. It might not be at all what you expected, but then again, since when was the show predictable? I don't know why that is surprising for anyone, because it certainly wasn't for me. I didn't really expect them to end things on a predictable note, to be honest with you. But in the end, guys, I absolutely loved everything about this season. There really isn't anything I can think of that really did bother me about this season. Maybe a few nitpicks here and there, but in the end, that's just nitpicks. That doesn't really have any bearing on my final grade this season. And at the end of the day, this really is everything I could want in a final season of this show. And I'm definitely going to give The Americans Season 6 overall an A+. So yeah, that's it, guys. The Americans is over. I can't believe it. I honestly really can't. When I sat down to binge the show 4 years ago, I never could have imagined what it turned out to be. I got so engrossed in it, especially in Season 2. That Season 1 was great, but Season 2 was really when I started to realize how amazing of a show this really was, and every season I just got more and more into it, and I'm just gonna miss talking to you guys about the show, honestly. This is one of my favorite shows to discuss, and, I know I didn't get to review every episode this season. I really wanted to, but I just simply didn't have enough time to do that, so, I had to do it in this season review, but I tried to include as much as I possibly could. If there's anything I didn't talk about that you guys wanted me to say, just comment or private message me or whatever you need to do. I will try to answer it to the best of my ability. But either way, guys, that's it for my review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys for sticking with me throughout all 6 of these seasons. I know in the beginning it was very rough. When I talk like this, I know that was very rough for sure. But in the end, I have absolutely loved reviewing this show for you guys. It's one of my favorite shows on TV. It's one of the best shows that I have ever seen for sure, and definitely something that I will never forget. I'm happy that it ended, definitely in the best way possible, but at the same time, I'm definitely going to miss it dearly. But either way, guys, I'm going to stop rambling now. That's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys thought of this amazing show overall, this season, just the show. Anything you want to say, just let me know about. And I will see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.